Is mayonnaise an instrument?
Patrick Star is a character that needs no introduction. Over the past 25 years of television, he's served as the deuteragonist of one of the most successful cartoons of all time. And even by himself, he's become so popular that he's gained his own spin-off show as a result.
Flawless victory.
Naturally, it makes sense that wherever SpongeBob goes, Patrick will follow. Most of the time anyway. And naturally, this extends into the Nicktoons crossover games. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, or you just know the title of this video, you know exactly where I'm going with this. That's right, we're talking about Super Brawl Summer. Riveting gameplay. Just like his poorest best friend, Patrick is a staple of both Nick All-Star Brawl games. And despite both games being away from the spotlight now, in recent community polls he still ranks high as one of the most popular characters to play in NASB 2. However, while casually he's still a fan favorite, unfortunately the competitive side of Patrick tells a much darker story, as he's considered the second worst character in NASB 1 and almost unanimously the worst character in NASB 2. With the gap between him and the second worst character in the game being high enough that he's considered to be the game's only D tier. So why does this fate keep befalling Patrick specifically? Is it a cruel joke by the balancing team? Is he just cursed by design? Or is he maybe literally just too dumb to compete? Well, in order to answer any of those, first we need to go back all the way to the beginning. Help Wanted is the first episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, and guys, that's not what I meant. Patrick is unsurprisingly one of the first characters on NASB 1's roster, sitting comfortably right next to SpongeBob and Sandy on the CSS, unlike traditional fighters who usually tend to have more concrete archetypes. Platform fighter archetypes can range from something well established within the genre, to being kind of established but more of a vague suggestion, and then there are just some characters you just can't put a label on. Thankfully, from the very beginning, Patrick's archetype was pretty clear. Patrick is a grappler. Grapplers have existed since the conception of the fighting game genre with Zangief in Street Fighter 2, usually characterized by having slow movement and poor range, but making up for it by having absolutely terrifying up-close pressure thanks to their devastating command throws. And Patrick fits that description pretty well. He's on the slower side of the cast, and his range is still very much rather lacking. But to make up for this, he has an arsenal of command grabs at his disposal, further cementing that yes, Patrick is indeed a grappler. If you input a 360 motion and then press special, Patrick will do an EX version of his down B, giving insane damage and some very cheesy kills. Aside from his grabs though, Patrick has a surprisingly decent combo game when he does get in, 2 pretty threatening dash attacks to use his tech chases, and some slow but extremely powerful strong attacks that can nuke the opponent's stock if they're not careful. This befits his archetype, as just like many grapplers, one correct guess can equal a huge payout. So what about Patrick specifically falters in comparison to most of the rest of the cast? Well, for starters, his ground strongs are very slow and laggy, and aside from dash attack and maybe up strong, you'll always eat a punish if you try it on block. Patrick also doesn't really have an answer to projectiles beyond universal system mechanics and his very slow air strongs. So while he still has ways around it, camping him out isn't too hard. Patrick's frame data, especially on the ground, also ranges from just mediocre to bad, and due to his slow air strongs, he tends to be a big victim of the game's rock paper scissors mechanic. Furthermore, while not the absolute worst, Patrick is one of the biggest losers in terms of recovery. And when you're a slow heavy in a very aggressive, combo-centric game, stuff like this tends to happen. That's okay at the end of the day, because Patrick still has his grabs, right? Well, in the final major patch of the game, a change was made to turn Shredder's air up strong from a command grab into a hit grab, but what the devs didn't realize is that they also accidentally applied all of the same logic to Patrick's command grabs, which means they're all now hit grabs, which means that Patrick the Grappler cannot grapple. This is a major blow to a character who already wasn't great to begin with, limiting Patrick's mix-up potential that he was supposed to have by design. But easily the worst part of this mistake is that it was very easily fixable. So easy in fact that it's literally just a singular button press. But unfortunately, due to this dev oversight and a lack of a hotfix, Patrick is stuck like this in vanilla NASB 1 forever, an already low-tier character that literally doesn't function properly. Fortunately though, the sequel would be much nicer to Patrick. For starters, his grabs actually function properly now, so that's an immediate buff over the NASB 1 version. And with the newly added slime, he no longer has to worry about doing a 360 motion or to get EX hug driver. Now he can just spend a bar to get it whenever he wants. Patrick's strong dash attack from the first game was also converted into a very powerful neutral special that also reflects projectiles, and his existing neutral special from NASB 1 was converted into a counter for down special, with both of these changes helping him counter projectiles better. But even with those in mind, if you can't beat him, why not join him? Table is a fantastic tool for Patrick to have. It's a great tool for getting off ledge, it's a good anti-air, and it's a deceptively powerful tool for ledge trapping. Add still keeping in his BM dash attack from NASB 1, being able to rob stock still with hug driver, and reaping the benefits of slime, and NASB 2 Patrick seems to fare much better than his NASB 1 counterpart. So why does he still fare worse overall? Well, NASB 1's roster feels very homogenized in a way. Pretty much every character except Rocco has the same exact throws, many characters have similar or almost borderline identical normals, and while there was definitely character-specific stuff, many of the characters in the game had very similar combo structures and routes. Patrick benefits from this, as even though his command grabs really don't work properly, he can still do the same combo and dash cancel shenanigans as the rest of the cast. But in NASB 2, even though Patrick changed, so did the competition. Obviously, NASB 2 has more characters, but Patrick retains many of his NASB 1 weaknesses with a more unique cast of characters that demand matchup knowledge. He still has pretty slow stats, in fact I'd argue he's even slower than NASB 1, which makes him very susceptible to camping even by characters that have no right to be doing that. In earlier builds of the game, Patrick had meterless tech to alleviate his slow movement speed, but that has long since been patched out, and now there's not much Patrick can do without spending a bar. Patrick's combo structure also feels more sluggish overall thanks to his new set of slower aerials. Now Patrick's aerials aren't inherently bad. They do great damage and serve well as good get-off-me's. But with the exception of a few, most of these moves keep the opponent away from Patrick rather than close to him, which is the opposite of what he wants. This makes the combo structure he had in the first game simply not possible most of the time, and rather now he's more reliant on getting his licks in for a few hits before being pushed back by the opponent or pushing the opponent back himself. He still has middling ground strongs just like the first game too, though up strong is actually pretty great. His crazy strong nair from the first game is now a multi-hit sup air. And while it's still a great kill move, if you don't hit the last hit, it won't actually send the opponent anywhere, leaving Patrick open for a punish. Just like NASB 1 as well, Patrick's recovery leaves a lot to be desired. While he can still grab the opponent with up special if they're not careful, it's still slow, predictable, and very susceptible to spikes and ledge hogs, which makes the benefit of Patrick being a heavyweight much less noticeable. Patrick's biggest weakness, in my honest opinion though, is as X Factor doesn't really do him as well as you'd expect. In NASB 2, every character, no matter where they are in the tier list, has some kind of X Factor. This factor is usually unique to them, helps them compete in a meta setting, or both. So what's Patrick's X Factor? Well, he does do really good damage, but then again so does half the cast. And Patrick's only real other X Factor is that he has an unburstable kill option. But in order to even get that, you have to hit your opponent close to ledge with a command grab with a hitbox that looks like this. So unless you spend a good chunk of meter or you're just a god at reading, the chances of you getting this grab every single time is slim to none. Combine that with his very bare-bones neutral game, mostly over-relying on dash attack and table, and Patrick feels outclassed by the entire roster, with even one of his top reps basically admitting he doesn't win any matchups. In fact, there's a character on the roster already who I'd argue is just a better version of Patrick in many respects. On the surface, Plankton is the same weight as Patrick and even slower and taller, which on paper would make him easier to hit. However, his movement options overall are much better in part thanks to his strong neutral air, which when positioned correctly allow him to glide across the stage or a platform very easily. Plankton's hitboxes are also huge, sometimes obnoxiously so, and generally they just have better combo potential across the board than Patrick's ever could. If for some reason Plankton has trouble comboing his opponent though, he can just use neutral special to cover the opponent in sticky sauce, making it anywhere from hard to nigh impossible for them to DI out. Plankton can have trouble getting in too, but he has much better ways to deal with this weakness. That is if he even needs to get in to begin with. Plankton also has not just one but two command grabs at his disposal. And while it's shorter than Patrick's, it's overall much faster. And just like Patrick's, this grab can be used to cheese stocks off stage, because of course it can. Plankton's recovery is also very versatile for a character his size and can be very tricky to intercept. And while that's a short list of things Plankton is capable of, the bottom line is despite having similar weaknesses, Plankton is considered a much more effective character than Patrick, being a whole 15 spots above him on the community tier list. Now does that imply that Plankton is a better designed character than Patrick? Not really. Making a zoner grappler hybrid is certainly a choice, but with no winning matchups and a character on the roster that's literally just a better him, can Patrick even succeed in a meta like this? Yeah, he can. If you said Patrick is a bad character, most people in the community would agree with you on that. But bad characters can still do good things. Patrick's strengths are still legitimate strengths, and you will get checked if you don't respect them. And despite being the literal worst character in the entire game, he still has more representatives in the top 50 than the character that's literally just a better version of him. Hell, even when NASB 1 was active before NASB 2 even came out, Patrick still had reps.
That's legendary.
Can Patrick succeed at the tippy top level? Well, that's up for debate. But in spite of weaknesses, in spite of the bad matchups, in spite of naysayers, through a small dedicated team of mains, Patrick has managed to persevere, and I think that's pretty great. Or maybe the community just sucks at fighting him. I mean, I play top 1 and I still lose to him sometimes. Don't make fun of me.